Hello. So I am here with Joe DiPietro. He has written the book and lyrics for a number of plays and musicals, including some Broadway hits. He's a Tony Award winner. He's written such shows as Memphis, All Shook Up, and I Love You, You're Perfect Now Change. And my favorite, and the one we're going to talk about
Mm.
today, Diana the musical. That's what
Yay!
that's the meat of our interview today.
Great.
So yeah. So my first question for you is how you got into writing, like specifically with plays and musicals.
Yeah, like when you're a writer, I just think it's something in you. I think you're a lifelong observer, and I always felt like I was when I was even very young. And when I started out, I think I wrote like in high school, I just would write short stories on my own and some poetry and that kind of thing. And I always loved writing and I always loved literature. And then I was exposed to theater by my parents very sort of early on, probably as I probably saw children's theater, but what I remember were seeing, they took me to see Broadway shows and then Broadway plays when I was a teenager. And I just immediately loved it. I immediately connected to it and it spoke to me. And then so I think I combined my natural instinct and love of writing with my sudden, absolutely love of theater.
Mhm.
And I said to myself, and I started writing plays, like really short plays and one act plays and scenes. And I would go to the library and I would take out plays from the local library. And I would, and this is absolutely true, but, when I had to write a book report, you could pick a classic book, and classic books are long and take a long time to read. But if you picked out a play, they're shorter, so I could read a play in a sitting and write about it, and it was still literature, and it was sort of what was meaningful to me. So I think I sort of almost taught myself how to write plays and what theater was just by see as many shows as I can, and then really reading plays. And then as a writer, I always say, no one gives you permission to write. You just have to do it. And I was in my 20s and out of school, and I got a job in advertising. Um, and at night, I would write plays. And it took me a long time, and I wrote for many years, and I sent them out, and no one cared. But I wrote long enough and I kept just wanting to do it. And it was never work for me. It was always joy and a
Mhm.
hobby and something I just naturally wanted to explore. So that's how I started. And then one day a theater said, hey, we're interested in this play. And, it started like that. There was no shortcut. I really had to grind it out, but that's how I became a writer.
Nice. So do you enjoy like writing plays over musicals, or do you like one more over the other?
You know what? I don't consider them separate disciplines, even though they really are. When you're writing a play, it's all you. You're responsible for every emotional beat and every plot point and every bit of entertainment in that play on that page. Whereas a musical, you're writing to the song, and
Mhm.
oftentimes the song is what provides the show the emotional catharsis per scene, or at least reveals character or moves the plot ahead. And if you're working with old songs, found songs, like in a jukebox or a biomusical, or if you're working with a composer, which I am not, they have it's a collaboration then.
Mhm.
So, but so I sort of consider them very similar, even though, as I said, they are a little, they're sort of different disciplines. But I would say that every time I'm writing a play, I think, oh, it'd be really fun to have a little snappy song here. And then every time I'm writing a musical, I go like, why can't I just write the whole scene and write all that and not have to worry about the music? So the grass is always greener. When I'm working on one, I sort of long to work on the other and vice versa.
Alright. So can you talk me through the beginnings of the Only Make Believe organization? I heard that you
Yeah.
were like on the board for that.
Yeah, I
What do you
was on the
do with that?
board, yeah, for 25 years. It's a great organization. My friend Dina Hammerstein, her husband Jamie Hammerstein, who was Oscar Hammerstein's youngest son, was my mentor in this business. He wound up producing "I Love You, You're Perfect Now Change" off Broadway. his assistant director was directing it, and he saw it and he liked it, and he was our angel. And then he became a mentor and a friend, and he died very suddenly one night, many years ago now. And Dina, his widow, to honor him, she was interested in two things. She used to be an actress, and so she was very interested in theater. But she had since, when she had married Jamie, she put a lot of her energies into various children's charities. And she would go to some of these charities. And one thing she liked to do is take kids to theater. But she realized pretty quickly that many of these kids, hospitalized, had issues, which made it very difficult for her to really, she couldn't take all the kids to theater. There were just limitations. So when Jamie died, she had this idea of combining Jamie and her interest in theater and her dedication to children's charities into this very simple but profound idea called Only Make Believe, where she hires three actors, and they bring costumes and the simplest backdrop. And for an audience of kids in hospitals and long-term care facilities who deal with all sorts of really challenging issues at very, very young age, we bring these little shows, these little interactive shows to these kids who oftentimes have never even seen a show. And it's amazing to watch because these kids basically, and they're very interactive. So the kids get to participate, and they get to wear a costume, and they get to be a prince or a spaceman or something. And it's just all about how the power of imagination can bring joy and therapy. And, even in some cases, there have been kids who have been selectively mute, and they start talking during the show because the actors encourage them to be rowdy and to talk back at them and stuff. So it's really a wonderful organization called Only Make Believe. And if anyone's interested in it, I encourage you to go to our website. It's still going strong after 25, 26 years.
It's great.
Yeah.
That sounds really interesting, especially the selectively mute children,
Yeah,
like
amazing.
opening up through it. It's crazy.
Yeah.
So getting back to writing,
Yeah.
so why do you have such a fascination with historical figures or celebrities? Because I've noticed a lot of your works revolve around people who are famous.
Yeah, I've written, a lot of dead people plays, I call them. But I don't know. I've always, I think to be a writer, you need to have an insatiable curiosity, and you need to be, at least a playwright, a student of sociology, psychology, politics, history. I think all of those things play into obviously the lives of people. Even if you're writing contemporary issues, you sort of need to know where these people come from and how they get there and what their diverse opinions would be. And I've just always been fascinated by history. And I think some of those stories are so rich, and some of those stories are untold. So I oftentimes get interested in reading, and I read a lot. I read a lot of histories. I read a lot of nonfiction in addition to fiction. So I sometimes just come up upon a story, and I think, God, I want to explore this, and I think I might be able to put it on stage in either a musical or a straight play vernacular. And that's literally how it starts. When I write something, I think, okay, I have to write something that I can get obsessively fascinated with for at least the 6 months to a year it'll take me to write it. And then, knock wood, if it gets to production, it's going to be years. Even if it gets only one or two productions, it takes time to do that. Rehearsals, rewrites, casting actors. I need to really be obsessed with things. So I just get obsessed with subjects. And I want to dig in, and history is, so rich for providing those exact
Yeah.
subjects. Yeah.
Okay, so what was the initial spark that convinced you to write Diana specifically?
I was reading. Diana would have been the same age. Was born very similar, near to me, so we were sort of the same age. And I had known about Diana what I say most American guys knew about Diana at the time. I knew about the crazy big wedding, the
Hmm.
awful death, the terrible marriage, the cradling of the AIDS babies, and her charitable work. and the fashion. But you know, I sort of just knew this person, and I still remember where I was when she died. It was just so shocking
Mhm.
and huge, just huge worldwide news. And I, as I said, I read a lot of biographies and I not and histories, and I just picked up a book about her, and I was reading it, and I was like, I didn't know this story. And one of the things that shocked me was I thought that she had met Charles, they fell in love for or in whatever way, and then he met Camilla and fell more in love with her. I didn't realize he had already been seeing Camilla and that she helped pick Diana out because she thought
Right.
she was the safe choice, who was stupid and wouldn't challenge him or her or their nefarious relationship. And I just thought, and I said, and it also just sung to me. And I thought, like, oh my God, this is a musical. And it always struck me reading it like her life was this comedy, this like almost like it's just surreal. You just can't
Mhm.
believe it. Couldn't believe how naive she was going into the marriage. I couldn't believe how badly he treated her and the whole media circus. And I've always been fascinated with media too. So I just thought, and I thought, God, 80s, also in the 80s were all these like British pop operas. And I thought,
Right.
God, a pop opera that really is also sort of this black commentary and this ridiculousness of it all. And then I had been working with David Bryan, who wrote Memphis and a couple other shows with, and we were looking for something else. And he's in the band Bon Jovi, so he was a rock star in the '80s. I'm like, what better, who better to write this pop opera from the 1980s than David? So I just got fascinated, and off we went.
So where's your edits and just like the original, was it meant to be
Hmm.
as camp or like satirical as I feel like it's often
Yeah,
perceived?
yeah, it was. You know, I always think not that. Yes, because I just think the whole media circus about her and the whole print, you know, all the like all that British royalty drag, I just think is so camp. I just think, you know, I don't know if you see Charles's coronation. He's wearing this like big ass crown, and it's like these like robes, like the cowardly lion in Wizard of Oz, and I'm like, how do you do that in this day and age?
Right.
You know, and how do you still have a monarchy in this day and age? And not find it campy and over the top. So I just thought her whole story was over the top. Her use of fashion was over the top. And I always say if she was alive during the height of Instagram, she would have more followers than anyone else because she would know
Mhm.
how that works and she would know how to feed that monster and it'd be fabulous. Yeah. So we sort of did this big, you know, it's a pop opera, this
Yeah.
big campy pop opera. Essentially was what I always felt the show was. And I always felt it, you know, I always wanted to make it funny because I
Yeah.
think she had great self-awareness about how ridiculous her life was, how ridiculous and what she also did, which was wonderful. She had great awareness of how within that ridiculousness, how popular and powerful she was, and she directed that power to helping others, which you know is and we certainly know people who get that power and they do you know things that are just self-serving or things that actually hurt others. But she really, you know, I think the goodness in her heart was is just so palpable and so obvious and so admirable.
Mhm. And like through the process of getting to
Hmm.
where, even to like the Netflix Pro shot and beyond,
Yeah,
because I know the script post Netflix is
yeah,
also different.
yeah.
There was a bunch of changes, and
Hmm.
you actually gave me two versions of the script to read.
Yeah.
And I read those, don't
Right.
you
Oh,
worry.
good.
And I was interested to see like all the cuts and additions and
Hmm.
just all the
Yeah.
changes between the couple different iterations that I've been able to read or
Hmm.
watch.
Hmm.
I think like the most notable removals were the young version of Diana
Yeah.
and her father and like her mother in the very first one.
Hmm.
Do you like, was there like a plot reason for this? Was it just like casting and having a child actor?
No, no, it was we had when we did the show premiere at the La Jolla Playhouse, and we actually had when you cast kids, you have to cast like little girls, and I think she was, you know, we cast 8 or 10 year olds to play young Diana in this sort of what I called an extended prologue. You have to cast 3 girls because kids can only work so many hours a
Right.
day. We cast 3 really talented little girls, so they were great. But we wound up it's interesting. Musicals are so complicated, and you always hear out of town tryouts, and that's because you need to put it in front of an audience to see what
Mhm.
resonates or not. And I thought that, I also thought, God, childhood, her mother abandoned the family, and that's really what allowed her to believe in this very, old school. A literal prince would come and save me, and she read these romance novels, and I just thought it was so fascinating. So we did this prologue, and we had these gorgeous set for it, and really cool music, and it moved quickly through time. And then we put it up in front of an audience, and we are like, "Oh, the audience doesn't care about any of this until Diana meets Charles." Like they just
Right.
did. Like you could just say they were trying to figure out the show. You could feel them. It wasn't bad or anything, but you could just try to feel figuring out the show. And I'm just a big believer in, don't be afraid to cut things that
Mhm.
are pretty good but not great.
Right.
So we just wound up when we moved to start previewing in New York, cutting that and and really figuring out how to get into the show
Mhm.
as expeditiously and as excitingly as possible. So that we did those rewrites. But I also have to say, what I've learned through my career is musicals, how you get into a musical, the start of it, and how you end it are two things that you don't really know until you put it in front of an audience and they
Yeah.
tell you. They tell you what information they need to get into your show, and then they tell you, did the show land for them in its last moments or not. So with Diana, it was just like, you know what, we have the wrong in. We just have the
Mhm.
wrong in, and we got rid of it. And I thought the show got off to a much swifter, defter start.
Yeah, and I think the ending of the show as well is it's very poignant.
Yeah.
Feel like that is one of my favorite parts. It's just
Uh,
I don't know how to explain it.
It
It
just
ties everything together nicely, and it's very solemn in a good way.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think Dave and I wanted to remind everyone, you know, as fun as big and campy and fun as this was, how horrible, it was
Right.
also an emotional, horrible ending. But she
Mhm.
left, we're here talking about her today. She still left impact, and everyone, even if you weren't born then, I think knows who Diana is, which is a
Right.
remarkable testament.
So you're saying like you cut stuff in previews, and I
Yeah,
know Diana was meant to open like at the end of March in 2020, and
yeah,
we know what happened then. Um,
yeah.
so, but the show was in the middle of previews before it got shut down. So, what did you
Mhm.
do during this time off, like before and after the preview?
Yeah. Well, it was during the pandemic, and we were in previewing, and we're literally doing the show, and suddenly, and audiences are coming, and audiences are vocal and laughing and having a good time, and we're selling tickets, and then we hear about this terrible disease that's coming, and suddenly audiences are canceling their tickets, and we were like, oh, we're going to shut down. And like at the time we thought, oh, we're shutting down for a month.
Right.
No one knew what was going on. But in previews is you have a month of previews generally in New York, so that's when
Mhm.
you really see it, and you really are like, okay, this is for a sophisticated New York audience. Let's cut things and do all those things. So uh so even during previews, we decided with the director Chris Ashley, we're going to continue to work hard on the show. But then we shut down after maybe a week or so of previews. And we thought, okay, the show's done. Let's still work on it. And we did, but it's a different way of working on it when you're not in front of an audience every night who are telling you what jokes are landing, what they're getting bored, where they're confused. So we sort of started working on it blindly, thinking that we're gonna, be up soon, and then we weren't. But I think we started to do things you do in previews, which is tweak this scene, tweak that scene, get rid of that joke. Then you're working on costumes and sound. There are other issues just besides the text.
Mhm. So how then did the pro shot come about, especially considering like it hadn't even opened and you
We
guys
hadn't
got
even
it?
opened. Yeah, it's interesting. We had gotten some movie offers for it at that point. It was doing really well. And one of our producers, Frank Marshall, is a Hollywood producer, very, very, very prominent Hollywood producer. Um, and he said, we have all these costumes. We have the show, and we have these costumes and the set, and everything is literally frozen on Broadway. All
Right.
the theater's there. No one's using it. The costumes are there, literally on stage, wrapped in plastic. We had no idea. The world had no idea when we were going to open again. And Frank had called, he knew the Netflix folks, and he sent them the script and the score, and they loved it. And they said, we want to do this pro shot. We had to follow all sorts of protocols. We all had to stay in a hotel and be isolated and blah, blah, blah. We were tested all the time. And that's how it came about. And, the one caveat with that, which I regret a bit, but we had to sort of do it for the pro shot at the time, is we couldn't have an audience. So
Right.
you don't watch it, you don't have that, like, because I do think in a way it's a big old campy black fun comedy, and and the audience would react that way to it.
Mhm.
And it was so exciting being in the theater with that, and we don't have that. But Chris Ashley, the director, directed and did a great job, and I'm just so happy it's preserved now forever, and on Netflix.
Me too. So
Yeah. Yeah,
I've
there you go.
watched it
Mhm. Yeah.
more times than I can count. So
Oh,
um,
thank you.
I don't want you to take this in a weird way, but
Okay.
how did you feel about Diana's like winning the Razzie Awards? Like, what did that make you think?
I don't really pay so much. I didn't quite know what that was, and someone told me, I was like, oh, but we're not a movie. We're just like a pro
Right.
shot, and this was done during the thing. I mean, I was more like, oh, like people do that. Like, why would you do this? And you're giving awards to like people in theater, like not movie stars, but theater
Right.
actors and those performances are great,
Mhm.
and they're great in the theater, and they're theatrical. So I just thought it was, a cheap, petty, stupid thing. I think the actors all thought it was pretty ridiculous and funny and sort of campy, but like I've been around for a long time, and I've had shows be celebrated and shows not in their initial runs, and I do think Diana would have run longer on Broadway if the pandemic hadn't happened and we opened, because we had a lot of momentum and stuff, and when we came back we didn't.
Right.
Yeah, but look, I was thrilled the pro shot exists. People like you, and from what I hear, many others, and apparently it's a very big rewatched program on Netflix. So people are enjoying it. So yeah, I think when you do anything that's public, you just sort of, okay, all right, and
Yeah.
you sort of move on. But I will say, like, the fact going after Broadway, working Broadway actors who were trying to make a living during a time when no one else was, I just thought was really sort of like, cheap and cruel and
Mhm.
really petty.
Right. I honestly think that is probably the most camp thing that could happen to it, honestly.
True. Yes. And then yeah, and I've had people congratulate. Yeah, I love that idea because it is true. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So, this question, what is
Mhm.
your favorite scene from the show that you got to write, and what was your
Oh,
favorite song?
I loved writing the scene in the AIDS wards, because that's what I knew I wanted to have a scene there. We knew it had to have some meaning. We knew that couldn't be campy, but I do know, and having lived through the AIDS crisis in New York City as a gay man, I do know that a lot of the men who were affected by AIDS, and many who died, many of them approached it with the same sense of I want to put this in the right way: irony and camp, and you know, just this very gay attitude about it. Um, and it was horrible, and it was hard, and it was an awful, awful time. But how some people comported themselves, and young people in this horrible thing was just great. And I wanted to capture that. I wanted to capture a sense of, you know, not just all, oh my God, I'm dying, but people still with gay wit and gay
Right.
attitude and all that. So we worked very hard on that scene. It took us a while to find that song. And I'm really like proud of it. I'm really
Mhm.
proud of it. And I'm proud that people got to see it. And the reaction, especially in the theater from audience from that, you could just feel them. It was really satisfying. So that's probably my favorite thing. Probably my favorite moment in the show. And I think the fuck you dress, because because I always hear it called the revenge dress and this and that. That's the David. We're from Jersey. Let's put as many fucks as we can into a song about this.
In silken lace that made me like so
just because like she, and if you look at pictures of her, she looks radiant stepping out of that
Yeah.
car. She's got those long legs and that dress, and her husband is, looks like he's swallowed golf balls on TV confessing to this affair. And she's out there like, oh my God, that's as camp a moment as could possibly be. So I also have to say, two opposites of the spectrum. Maybe those are my two favorite points of the show. And in the theater, that song would get 5 or 6 huge laughs and applause just for the song. So I was really just proud of that.
That's good. Okay. Do you have any questions for me?
No, I will say I appreciate I love hearing that you've watched Diana so much time on Netflix and stuff because we worked hard in it. And when you write a show in the theater, I'm certainly there for during previews, and I go back and I see audience reactions, and you feel it. And when you do something for television, you write it, and it's it's out on it's on, through cables and through the internet, and it just sort
Right.
of flies away in the air, and you feel you don't have a connection to it. So I think the
Hmm.
fact that a young person such as yourself is so connected to it and really enjoys it so much makes me feel really, really good and really, really appreciate. So I'd like to thank you too for this.
Thank you. Okay. Well, thank you so much for meeting with me. This is really cool. I told all my friends
Oh,
about. I was really excited.
oh, good.
So, yeah, I'm gonna end the recording.